Hi, it's Dougie, and in this video I'm going to show exactly how to add an expiry date to your documents in SharePoint, as well as how to create an automated solution that will send you reminders of when your documents are going to expire. This is a very typical solution which is used quite often with things like policies inside of an intranet. So inside of my little test intranet here, I've created a policies area where I'm going to store all my policies. Now, not only are they going to be version controlled, but I'm also wanting to be notified when these documents are due to expire. Because quite often policies, they get reviewed and approved on a sort of periodic basis. So we want to make sure that we're getting notified when the documents are going to be expired. We might want to be notified, say, 30 days or 60 days before they're due to expire, so that we have a chance to update them and make sure they're staying up to date. We want them to stay nice and up to date so that they stay relevant to everybody that's reading them in our business. So the first step is we need to know how to add an expiry date to a SharePoint document. Now, to achieve this, we need to add a date column to our document library. So let's take a look. So back in my document library, as I say, I'm using a policies document library as an example here. Now, this isn't anything overly special. All I've done is I've created a new document library and I've named it policies. Now I'm going to add a new column. So I can see here I've got this add column option. Now I'm not going to go through and explain all the different types of column types that you can add to SharePoint, but at a high level, you've got things like text if you just wanted a single line of text, choice if you wanted to select a choice. So if you wanted to tag, say for example, what type of document is it? Is it a policy? Is it a procedure? Is it a handbook? Is it a training guide? You can add in different choices to this. Now, the one I do want to use is this date and time. Now, we don't have to include time. And in this scenario, actually, I'm not that bothered. I'm not going to include time. It's not time specific. But if you're building a custom solution that does require time, you can add that as a kind of parameter of this field. So now I'm going to click on next, and it's going to say, well, what do I want to call the name of this column? So I'm going to call this my expiry date. And I can give a description. So the date that my document is due to expire. And then the type is date and time, as I've already selected. I don't need to include time in here. If you did, you can just use that toggle to include time. Friendly format just means rather than it giving an exact date and time sort of written out, it will show it in this kind of friendly format here. So it will sort of say created 1 day ago, created 2 days ago, or something like that. But actually, I find it easier, especially when you're dealing with dates in workflows, to make sure that you can see them printed in their date form. So it's much easier to understand. We can also say the default value. So the default value might be today's date or a selected date and time. For an expiry date, though, typically you would manually want to set that. And in fact, actually, a lot of kind of approval workflows will finish by setting the expiry date to a certain frequency that you've chosen. So now all I need to do is click on save, and that's then going to create my column. What I would suggest is, before you get started building your workflow, is actually add some data into this. Now you could go through line by line adding each document, or if you click on this edit in grid view, it'll put it into like a spreadsheet mode. And then you can just select a date and even then just drag that down. So there we go. We've got some expiry dates, or let's say, for example, I'm going to set this to be next year. Select that, drag that down, and there we go. We've got all of our kind of expiry dates now set to 12 months from now. So now if I click on exit grid view, that'll then save all of the changes that I've made to my documents. You can actually see here, if you've watched my previous video on version control, you can now see that actually these versions are now incremented by a minor version as well. So I've got 1.2, 2.2, and so forth. That's not necessarily required though for this. It's just something I've just spotted at the corner of my eye. So the next step in this is we need to be thinking about how we can now add our workflow. So how to create a document expiry reminder. So to create a document expiry reminder, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leverage the out-of-the-box Power Automate feature inside of document library integrations, which allows us to create a reminder directly from the expiry date field. So let's take a look. So back in my document library, you'll see if you click on the automate option across the top, you have this option here that says set a reminder. Now you've already got the expiry date column preset. So it knows that it's going to integrate directly into this column straight away. And by automate, what it actually means is Power Automate. It's going to create me a Power Automate workflow preset from a template, and the only input it needs is this expiry date. So if I select on this expiry date, it's then going to just load up for me on the right hand side the workflow template. What it's doing is just checking that I've got all my connections in place here. So SharePoint, the notifications, and the Office 365 users connection. If any of these go red or it says needs connection, just click on the little three dots next to this, and it will either ask you to sign in or it'll automatically just go to green and tick this as well. Once we've done that, we click on the continue button across the bottom, and then we're going to need to give it a name. So this is your Power Automate flow name. By default, it just says get an email reminder, but I might want to call this something like policies expiry email reminder. So then I can then say the other parameter of this is remind me this many days in advance. So quite often with say policies, it might be say 60 days in advance that you actually want to get notified that this document is due to expire. So now we click on create, and this is going to create me my workflow. You give it a couple of seconds and then it will have saved and published, and it will actually start working straight away. And this is what the email will look like when it actually is triggered. A document is up for expiry. It will send you an email that will come through. It will come from Microsoft Power Automate, and you can see here it's telling me I've been asked to be reminded by my expiry workflow, and it will actually list out all the different documents which are expired. So in this case, I can see the company culture document is expired, so I can click through to that. I can see the full document, make my changes, and then I would typically navigate back into SharePoint to either mark it as that it's updated, and I can change expiry date manually in that same way that I was showing you before by editing the properties of the document, and then it will then basically wait dormant again, and when it comes round to be reviewed again, it will then go through that same process of notifying me automatically. Before we dive in any further and talk about some of the configurations and making this a little bit more advanced, just a quick reminder, please do subscribe to the channel, like this video. If you've got any questions or comments or thoughts, please use the comments box below to let me know. And please use the alert option as well to be notified for more future content which is going to come out. So the final thing then is how to further configure your expiry reminder. So this might be, for example, you've changed your mind about how often you want to get reminded, or maybe you want to take this a step further and you want to also receive reminders inside of Microsoft Teams, or there's something else you want to further configure your reminder workflows to do. So let's take a look at how we do that. So as I mentioned before, this workflow is actually all Power Automate. So if I go to office.com and then search for Power Automate to open up the Power Automate center, if I then click on My Flows on the left-hand side, I'll actually see all the flows I've created, including this policies expiry email reminder I've just created. By clicking on Edit, that'll take me into my Power Automate, where I can see how the workflow runs. I can see across the top, it's the reoccurrence is it's running every day at 3 p.m. Now, a configuration you might choose to make is you might want to get this to run maybe at sort of 9 o'clock in the morning or something like that, because what's going to happen is this workflow will run very quickly and it will send out the email notifications at this time of day. So if you wanted it to actually say be sent out at 9 a.m. instead, you could actually click on this, click on say show advanced options, and then you could specify a different start time. So for example, rather than 3 p.m, I'm going to say I want this to go out at 8 a.m. click on save, and now instead of getting those emails at 3 p.m, I'm going to get them at 8 a.m. So I'm more likely to respond to them on that specific day. I'm not going to go into too much detail about how this is configured because I want to keep it quite high level in terms of not overcomplicating things. But essentially, the other configuration that you might want to change is this days to be reminded in. So I've set it to 60 days, but it might be actually that's too much time, and actually 30 days is fine. So 30 days, almost best parts of a month, is when I'm going to set my reminder to. Get my profile is just getting your details. There's nothing really to configure here. Again, under the scope to get items due, actually says in 1 day. Now I think that's a bit misleading. That actually isn't something which will update even if you change the days originally when you were creating the workflow via the SharePoint document library. This always says 1 day. It's a little bit of a kind of bug that's been kind of built in by Microsoft here, that this not actually is being updated, but you can change this yourself by clicking on the 3 dots and clicking on rename. You could change this to say 30 days here. Again, I wouldn't mess too much with any of this in terms of these are all the calculations of it's calculating the days until the reminder. This is actually using a HTTP request to get the SharePoint document library and the items which are contained within it. Then we've got the conditions in here. Now, we've got the apply to each, which is basically getting all of the different elements, all the different documents which fall under the category of expired and building up a nice little kind of table for us, and then it's compiling this all into a send me a reminder email, which if you're into your HTML and CSS, that's essentially what this is kind of building up in here. Now, what you also might want to do is you could also pin onto the back of this as a configuration some additional elements that you want it to do when this condition is met. So you might want to say, for example, it to message you on Teams. So you could add in an action in here, and we could specify it's going to be a Microsoft Teams action, and we're going to say, we might want to select the post message into a chat or channel, and we can post as either the flow bot or the user that's creating it. And then we could choose what team we're posting into. Sorry, we're posting into a channel. So let's say we're posting into a channel. Then it'll specify, well, what team you're going to be posting into. So I might just say I'm posting this into my Project X team. The channel that it's going to be, so I'll say it's my planning channel, and then the message of what I'm going to say. I might say this document is expired and some details about it, and I might want to hook into some of this other details above. But this is just a really quick example of how you could extend this functionality further. Really, the kind of possibilities are endless, and it's a nice and simple way that you can take something that's an out-of-the-box feature and extend it even further using this Power Automate functionality. I hope you found this video useful. If you do, please subscribe to the channel. Use the alerts icon as well, so you can be alerted every time that there's a new video that comes out. If you've got any questions or comments at all, please use the comments feed below and let me know. Try and answer every question that gets posted onto my videos. And please watch out for future content. And if you've not already, you can follow me on LinkedIn as well, and join some of the kind of groups where we're talking about SharePoint. And if you do have any suggestions for any future videos you'd like to see, please let me know. Thank you very much for your time.